Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of History's Greatest Battles. If you enjoy this episode, please share it with a friend. There are men who, in a vacuum of nothingness, have an ambition to rise to their greatest heights. And obviously those greatest heights are dictated by the culture they are in, their religions, and the values their society has placed as apex in their time. These men, especially those in more modern recorded history who achieved and would have continued to achieve incredible feats, appear to have a proverbial gas poured on them, a fire blazing larger and hotter than natural when they encounter the stories of other mortal men like them, with this internal unrelenting resolve to achieve, to rise to the challenge. Perhaps the oldest and one of, if not the most impactful, was Alexander the Great, who critically inspired the likes of Caesar, Napoleon, and countless others. Did Alexander have such a man to act as his gasoline? Was it the mythical men of the Iliad, or the gods? Or were there mortals who, lost to history, meant as much to him, to Alexander, as he does to us? Regardless, it is men's internal duty to arise to the challenge and to conquer it that has made them great. As stated by Jim Whittaker, challenge is the core and mainspring of all human activity. If there's an ocean, we cross it. If there is a disease, we cure it. A record, we break it. And if there's a mountain, we climb it. Now let's sit back and experience when Alexander did just that at the Battle of Gaugamela.
Welcome to History's Greatest Battles, Season 1, Episode 32, The Battle of Gaugamela, the 1st of October, 331 BC. Alexander's forces, modern historians estimate roughly 47,000 men. Persian forces, modern historians estimate roughly 200,000 men. With his decisive victory, Alexander shattered the Persian Empire, bringing to its knees an ancient dynasty that had once ruled from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. In its place, he flung open the gates of the east, laying bare the vast territories stretching to India, ripe for the unstoppable Macedonian war machine to sweep across and conquest. What had once been the heartland of the Persian kings now became the hunting ground of Alexander as he carved a path deeper into the unknown, leaving nothing unconquered in his wake.
In the turbulent 350s BC, Philip I seized the throne of Macedon, a rugged and impoverished kingdom shadowed by the wealth and might of its southern Greek neighbors. With iron will and relentless ambition, Philip forged an army that would rival any in the ancient world. Sensing Athens reeling from its recent social war, 358 to 355, he struck, ripping away its provinces along the Greco-Macedonian border, carving out new realms for his rising power. As the Greek city-states descended into their habitual bickering, Philip's gaze turned northward, where he expanded Macedonian dominion with ruthless efficiency. Once secure, he marched south, hurling Macedon's strength against Greece itself, challenging its ancient powers head-on. In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip's army crushed the combined might of Athens and Thebes. With this single devastating blow, he stood as the undisputed master of the Greek peninsula, bending even the proudest city-states to his will. The following year, Philip forged the Hellenic League, uniting the once fractured Greek city-states under his banner. Their collective purpose was singular: the annihilation of the Persian Empire, the very force that had once menaced Greece's survival. On the brink of unleashing the might of the Hellenic League across the Hellespont into Asia, Philip's life was cut short by an assassin's blade in 336 BC. His son, Alexander, inherited not just the throne, but a kingdom poised for war, his destiny intertwined with his father's unfinished ambition. Though barely 20, Alexander's fierce presence on the battlefield at Chaeronea and his upbringing in the shadow of Philip's iron rule won him the undying loyalty of the Macedonian army. They saw in him not merely a boy, but a leader forged in blood and fire. But loyalty beyond Macedon was a fickle thing. As Alexander crushed northern rebellions with ruthless precision, he learned that Athens, mistaking him for dead, had dared to break from the League, emboldened by false hope. Alexander marched south, very much alive, and descended upon Athens with his full authority, reasserting control with unshakable force. With his grip on Greece now secure, he turned his gaze east, ready to fulfill his father's grand design, the invasion of Persia. Educated by none other than Aristotle himself, Alexander possessed not only the mind of a scholar, but the burning heart of a Greek patriot. His campaign against Persia was not just revenge for Xerxes' brutal invasion of Greece centuries earlier. It was a mission to impose Greek intellect, power, and Greek culture on the world. In battle after battle, Alexander's reputation as a bold and ingenious general grew. Whether against local Persian satraps or Darius III himself, every army that faced him was ground beneath his relentless advance. His army stormed through Asia Minor, seizing it under the banner of Greece. At Issus in 333, Alexander shattered Darius's forces and then secured the entire eastern Mediterranean coast, cutting the Persian Empire's lifeline to the sea. By locking down the harbors, Alexander stripped Darius of his naval power, leaving the Persian Emperor's forces crippled on the seas, vulnerable to his relentless onslaught. In the years 332 and 331, Alexander's march led him into Egypt, where he was crowned pharaoh, an honor that declared him the divine son of Amun-Ra, the supreme Egyptian god. This newfound status, amplified by his mother Olympias' lifelong claim that he was not Philip's son, but Zeus's, shaped Alexander's sense of destiny, blending god and king within him. At the sacred oracle of Siwa, Alexander embraced his divinity, urging the world to see him not merely as a king, but as a living god. Whether this was the outgrowth of madness or the shrewd manipulation of Eastern politics has been a matter of debate for over 2 millennia. What is certain is that during this period, Alexander's ambitions crystallized. He no longer sought just to crush Persia, but to craft a unified empire that would reshape the known world in his image. After a triumphant winter in Egypt, where he founded the immortal city of Alexandria, Alexander unleashed his army once more in 331, setting out in relentless pursuit of Darius, his thirst for conquest burning brighter than ever. Since his humiliation at Issus, Darius had not been idle. He gathered a vast army, preparing meticulously for a final confrontation. His plan was clear: draw Alexander into open terrain where Persian numbers would drown the Macedonian force in sheer, overwhelming might. Darius entrenched his colossal army on the left bank of the Tigris, choosing a vast, open plain 70 miles west of Arbela. There he waited, confident that Alexander's ambition would drag him into the killing field he had prepared. Alexander did not disappoint. His forces crossed both the Euphrates and the Tigris with little resistance, reaching Gaugamela by the end of September 331. The stage was set for a clash that would decide the fate of these empires. The primary chronicle of Alexander's campaign comes to us through the pen of Roman historian Arrian, writing centuries after the event. Arrian asserted that his account was based on the first-hand journals of 2 of Alexander's trusted generals, making his narrative one of the most credible records of this ancient war. Yet Arrian's claim that Darius commanded an army of 1 million men at Gaugamela has been the subject of fierce debate. Modern estimates, based on descriptions of Persian troop movements, suggest a force closer to 200,000 infantry and perhaps 45,000 cavalry. Still an immense horde, but not the mythical legions of ancient lore. Darius pinned his hopes on the savage spectacle of war machines. 200 scythe chariots designed to carve through ranks of men, and 15 mighty war elephants, beasts never before unleashed on a battlefield outside of India. Alexander, bolstered by reinforcements from Macedonia, commanded roughly 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry, a mere fraction of Darius's colossal army. Even by modern estimates, the Persians held a staggering 5-1 advantage. The vast plains of Gaugamela were chosen by Darius himself, offering his massive force the perfect theater to envelop and annihilate the Macedonian army. To ensure his victory, Darius had the battlefield meticulously leveled, clearing any obstacle that might hinder the deadly charge of his scythe chariots. The ground itself had been prepared as a weapon. At the end of September, Alexander arrived on the high ground above the plain. His generals, eager for battle, clamored for an immediate assault. But Alexander, known as the tactician, ignored their impatience, choosing instead to spend the day surveying the battlefield, studying every detail with a calculating eye. Darius, unnerved by Alexander's measured approach, feared an imminent night assault. His army was kept on high alert, restless and weary, through a night of waiting for an attack that never came. As dawn broke, Alexander's men stood fresh and ready, their strength untouched by the night. In stark contrast, the Persian army, exhausted by sleepless vigilance, already began the day at a disadvantage. Darius arrayed his forces in the time-honored Persian formation. Infantry amassed in the center, cavalry on the flanks, scythe chariots spread across the front, and the mighty elephants standing as the unshakable heart of his army. This was no ordinary army. It was a colossal force, drawn from every corner of the Persian Empire. Among them stood even Greek mercenaries, veterans who had survived the slaughter at Issus and now fought under Darius's banner once more. Darius relied on these seasoned Greeks, well-versed in the tactics of their homeland, to anchor the left side of his battle line, hoping their discipline would hold the Persian flank firm. Alexander mirrored Darius's formation, but on a vastly smaller scale. His entire army, once deployed, stretched only as wide as the Persian center, a stark reminder of the overwhelming numbers he faced. Anticipating the threat of encirclement by Darius's superior numbers, Alexander angled his cavalry on both flanks, ready to counter any Persian move. Behind them, he positioned a second line of infantry, divided into two units, prepared to respond to any crisis or exploit any opening. This reserve would reinforce the cavalry in case of a Persian flanking maneuver or surge forward to drive a wedge through any opportunity the battle might offer. As the morning sun rose on October the 1st, 331 BC, two titanic forces stood poised for battle, ready to clash in a struggle that would decide the future of empires. With the cold precision of a seasoned commander, Alexander led his cavalry on the Greek right flank, spearheading the assault. He advanced in a deadly echelon formation, cavalry at the tip of the spear, light infantry trailing just behind and to the left, with the unyielding phalanx of heavy infantry following in tight ranks. His target, the infantry guarding the left of the Persian center, where the first cracks would soon appear. Darius, seizing the moment, unleashed his chariots, their scythe-like blades spinning with murderous intent, aiming to tear through the Macedonian phalanx. Yet Alexander's light infantry moved swiftly, raining down arrows and javelins. Men and horses fell, their deadly charge broken. The vaunted Persian chariots rendered useless before they could even reach their prey. Following the failed chariot assault, Persian cavalry from the center surged through the gap between Alexander's right wing and his center, a breach in the Macedonian line. Yet instead of turning their swords to envelop the vulnerable Greek forces, they broke ranks and galloped forward, their eyes fixed greedily on the riches of the Greek base camp, abandoning their strategic advantage for plunder. Their reckless charge left a yawning gap in the Persian line. Alexander, ever watchful, saw the opportunity unfold and, with ruthless speed, drove his forces into the breach, thrusting toward the heart of the enemy formation. With relentless ferocity, Alexander hurled his men directly at Darius himself. For a fleeting moment, Darius stood firm, rallying his men amidst the chaos. But the Macedonian assault proved too much. The Persian king fled in terror, abandoning his army. As he vanished from the battlefield, so too did the courage of his forces, as the Persian center and left crumbled in his wake, dissolving into panic and retreat. Meanwhile, on the Greek left, the battle raged with equal ferocity. Parmenio, Alexander's most loyal general, was locked in a desperate struggle against the relentless advance of the Persian right wing. Vastly outnumbered, his forces barely held their ground, but the reserve units Alexander had wisely placed earlier surged forward to reinforce him, staunching the tide of Persian attackers. But even with the reinforcements, Parmenio's line teetered on the brink of collapse. disaster loomed, until Alexander, sensing the danger, wheeled his forces around in a stunning maneuver. He struck the Persian right wing from the side with devastating force, turning the tide of battle in an instant. Alexander's strike, combined with the shocking news of Darius's cowardly retreat, shattered the Persian will to fight. The once mighty attack disintegrated, their forces breaking apart in disarray, scattering before the unstoppable Macedonian advance. True casualty numbers remain elusive, lost to the chaos of ancient warfare. Arrian boasts of only 100 Greek dead against 300,000 Persian dead, though later Roman historians Curtius and Diodorus estimate Persian losses between 40,000 and 90,000, with Greek casualties ranging from 300 to 500. Modern scholars can only guess. But what is undeniable is the staggering imbalance. Persia's dead lay in droves, while Alexander's forces stood largely intact. To seal his dominion over the vast Persian Empire, Alexander knew one thing: Darius had to be his, dead or alive. Yet the urgency of saving Parmenio from the collapse delayed Alexander's pursuit, allowing Darius to flee far ahead. Instead of chasing a ghost, Alexander shifted his focus. He would take the prize cities of Persia, Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, and bring the empire to its knees. Seizing these cities delivered the Persian Empire's unimaginable wealth into Alexander's hands, along with the immense political power that flowed from controlling the heart of its dominion. Now the master of Persia's seat of power and its overflowing treasury, Alexander set his sights on the north. He marched toward Ecbatana, determined to find and finish Darius once and for all. But before Alexander could claim his prize, fate intervened. Darius, the once great king of kings, was betrayed and murdered by his own governor, Bessus, a knife to the back from the very hands meant to protect him. Darius had struggled to hold together his crumbling empire even before the Macedonian invasion. Alexander, now seeing the fracturing lands before him, understood his task was far from over. To truly reign as emperor, he had to impose his will across every Persian possession, uniting the shattered pieces under his iron rule. With unrelenting force, Alexander marched onward, sweeping toward the Caspian Sea, crushing any who dared oppose him in Afghanistan, the Caucasus, and deep into the wild lands of northwest India. His empire stretched further than any man had ever yet dreamed. Yet it was not Alexander's ambition, but the will of his battle-weary men that finally halted his march. By 326, their spirits exhausted from endless war, they demanded their king return to Persia and rule the empire he had conquered. Alexander, though furious, reluctantly agreed. The final leg of their journey was a brutal march through the scorching deserts between India and modern Iraq. Thousands of Alexander's soldiers, hardened by war, but no match for the merciless elements, perished in the unforgiving sands. When Alexander finally reached Susa in 324, the fire of constant conquest faded, replaced by the burdens of empire. No longer just a warrior, he embraced the role of administrator, yet still held himself as something greater than a mere mortal, an almost divine figure, in line with the Eastern monarchs he now ruled over. Alexander, now cloaked in the regal robes of Persia and embracing its customs, commanded the awe of his newly conquered subjects. Yet this transformation unsettled his Macedonian soldiers. They had followed a king of iron and fire, only to see him now adorn himself as an Eastern monarch, slipping further from the warrior they had known. Balancing the loyalty of his battle-hardened troops with the task of weaving together the myriad of races and cultures under his banner strained even Alexander's immense will. The vision of a unified empire, vast and seamless, threatened to unravel under its own weight. Ever known for his boundless appetites, Alexander fell to his own excesses. At just 33, the man who had never been defeated in battle was conquered by a fever, his body weakened by years of heavy drinking. The ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen succumbed to mortality, his once indomitable strength finally giving way. Though Gaugamela and the battles that followed had gifted Alexander the largest empire the ancient world had ever known, his legacy was far greater than mere conquest. His mission was not just to rule, but to reshape the world itself. With unimaginable wealth and power at his feet, Alexander's hunger went beyond dominion. He sought to unify the world, to forge a new order where civilizations would not just coexist, but thrive under a single guiding vision, his own. Though Aristotle had drilled into him the idea that all non-Greeks were barbarians, Alexander's worldview evolved. He saw that anyone, whether Greek, Persian, or beyond, who embraced order, intellect, and culture, could be considered truly civilized. His empire, in his eyes, was not built on blood alone, but on the union of minds and peoples. To Alexander, barbarism was no longer a matter of race or birthplace, but of action. Those who lived in chaos and ignorance, no matter their heritage, were the true barbarians. The seeds of a unified world, led by Greek intellect and Alexander's boundless vision, were just beginning to take root when death seized him. His empire, teetering on the edge of true cohesion, was left unfinished. Without an heir of ruling age, the empire Alexander had bled for quickly fractured under the ambitions of his generals, who tore it apart in their scramble for power. His dream of unity crumbled, but the cultural legacy he had unleashed proved indestructible. Greek language, philosophy, and art took root throughout the Middle East, persisting long after his empire's fall. For centuries after his triumph at Gaugamela, the very fabric of civilization, from philosophy and language to art, bore Alexander's unmistakable mark, spreading from the shores of the Mediterranean to the farthest reaches of India. His military victories may have faded, but his cultural conquest endured, shaping the world long after his empire had turned to dust.